The airport was buzzing as usual. Gate B7 was filled with passengers lining up to board Flight 382 to Dallas. Among them stood 16-year-old Layla Carter, holding a small pouch close to her chest. Inside were her essential medications, ones she needed to keep her chronic condition under control. Her father, Marcus Carter, a calm but firm ex-Air Force pilot, walked beside her. He had that kind of quiet authority that made people take notice without him saying much. Layla was excited. This was her first solo trip, and he was only walking her to the gate before she boarded. "Text me when you land," Marcus said, hugging her tightly. "And keep those meds with you at all times, all right?" "I know, Dad." "I got it," Layla smiled. After a few more minutes of waiting, Layla handed over her boarding pass and stepped onto the plane, looking back at her father one last time. She gave him a thumbs up. He nodded, trusting the airline to do the rest. She found her seat in row 17, tucked her bag under the seat, and sat quietly. As the flight attendants moved through the cabin doing routine checks, one of them, a tall, stern-looking woman named Karen Mitchell, paused at Layla's row. "Excuse me, what's in that pouch under your seat?" she asked sharply. Layla blinked, confused. "Just my medicine." Karen narrowed her eyes. "It can't be loose like that. Give it here." I need to keep it with me." "It's prescribed, give it here," Karen snapped, reaching down and snatching the pouch without waiting for a response. Layla sat frozen as the flight attendant stormed to the front of the plane with her medicine in hand. She had no idea this flight would never take off. Up in the front galley, Karen stood with Layla's medication pouch in her hands. Another attendant glanced over. "What's that?" "Some untagged medical stuff from a teenager in row 17. "Doesn't look authorized," Karen muttered, flipping the pouch over as if it were suspicious cargo. Without warning, she tossed the entire pouch into the trash bin behind the curtain. "I don't have time for nonsense today," she said under her breath. Back in row 17, Layla was growing increasingly anxious. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. Her chest tightened. She reached for the call button. Ding. Karen returned, clearly annoyed. "My medicine," Layla said quietly, "I really need it. It's time sensitive." "It's been disposed of," Karen replied flatly. "Passengers are not allowed to carry unapproved liquids or unlabeled medical kits. You should have checked it." Layla's eyes widened in shock. That's my prescription. You threw it away." "Policy is policy. Sit tight. We'll be departing shortly." Layla felt her throat constrict, not just emotionally. Her body was already reacting. She could feel the early symptoms. Her breathing shortened. Her skin prickled with heat. She tried to steady herself. She took slow breaths. But she knew her condition too well, she wouldn't last long without her meds. She reached for her phone with trembling hands and dialed one number. Her dad. Marcus Carter was still walking through the terminal when his phone buzzed in his pocket. "Layla, calling." He answered instantly. "Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay?" "Dad," Layla's voice was shaking. "She took my meds." "The flight attendant, she threw them away. I told her I needed them and she didn't care." Marcus stopped walking. "What?" His voice dropped an octave. "She said it wasn't allowed. I'm starting to feel it. My throat's tight. I think it's already starting." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm coming back. Stay calm. Don't panic. Keep breathing." He turned on his heel and began sprinting. Years of military training kicked in. Every step was calculated, swift, relentless. He didn't care who he bumped into. His daughter was in danger, and someone was about to answer for it. At the gate, the flight crew was preparing to close the cabin door when Marcus arrived, flashing his retired pilot credentials like a badge of war. "I need access to Flight 382 now," he barked. "I'm sorry, sir, boarding is closed, my daughter is on that plane. She just called me. Her prescribed medication was thrown away by one of your flight attendants. She has a medical condition. If she has a reaction midair, this airline will have a lawsuit so big it'll need wings of its own to land." The gate agent hesitated, wide-eyed. I need to speak to the captain." "You do that," Marcus snapped, pulling out his phone. "While you're at it, I'm calling the FAA and the media." Inside the plane, Layla was beginning to sweat. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred at the edges. Passengers around her started to notice. Then came the voice over the intercom, "Captain to cabin crew, hold departure. We have a situation." Passengers looked around in confusion as the engines quieted down. The fasten seatbelt sign stayed lit, but the aircraft didn't budge from the gate. Layla was slumped slightly in her seat now, her breathing shallow. A woman across the aisle leaned over. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Layla barely nodded. The intercom crackled again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay. Please remain seated as we resolve a passenger matter." Karen, the flight attendant, marched back down the aisle with visible irritation. "What now?" she mumbled, arriving at Layla's row. Layla looked up weakly. "You need to get my dad." "I need help." Karen scoffed. "This again? You're just nervous. You'll be fine." But before she could say another word, the front of the plane stirred. A male voice, loud, commanding, echoed through the cabin, "Layla." Heads turned as Marcus Carter stormed aboard, escorted by a visibly rattled gate supervisor and a stunned co-pilot. Karen froze in place. "Sir, you can't be," "I'm not asking," Marcus growled, eyes locked on his daughter. "Layla, baby, I'm here." She gave him a faint smile of relief. He turned to Karen. "Where's her medication?" Karen blinked. "It was disposed of." Marcus took one slow step forward. "You threw away a 16-year-old girl's life-saving medication without even asking a supervisor." Karen didn't answer. The captain appeared at the cockpit door. "Mr. Carter, I understand you're a retired pilot." Marcus turned to him, calm but deadly serious. "Yes. And if this plane takes off before my daughter is treated, you're flying straight into federal trouble." The captain hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "Everyone off." Flight grounded until further notice. A wave of murmurs surged through the cabin as the captain's voice came over the intercom one last time. "Due to a medical emergency, this flight has been delayed indefinitely. Please prepare to deplane." Passengers sighed, some groaned, but most looked toward the teenager in row 17 with concern, and then at the man standing protectively in front of her. Layla was now leaning on her dad's side as he guided her slowly down the aisle. The captain personally cleared the path. A paramedic team was already waiting at the jet bridge, having been called by Marcus the moment he got past security. Karen stood silently in the galley, arms crossed, her face drained of color. As they passed her, Marcus stopped. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply said, "You're not fit to serve the public. Not when you treat a child like a security risk instead of a human being." Then he kept walking, never looking back. On the tarmac, Layla was stabilized quickly with a backup dose from her emergency kit that her father had kept in his car. Within minutes, her breathing eased, color returned to her face, and she squeezed his hand. "Thanks, Dad. You stopped a whole plane for me," she said softly. Marcus knelt beside her, brushing the hair from her forehead. "I'd ground the entire fleet if I had to." Meanwhile, inside the terminal, chaos erupted. Passengers were demanding answers. Airline supervisors were reviewing security footage. HR reps were already making calls. And Karen? She had been escorted away quietly by an operations manager with a clipboard and a very serious look. The airline's legal department had just received a 3-word message from Marcus Carter's attorney, "See you soon." Within 24 hours, the story hit social media. A teenager's life-saving medication trashed. A father, a decorated ex-Air Force pilot, storming the plane to protect his daughter. The flight grounded. The captain obeying him, not the crew. A viral clip taken by another passenger showed Marcus walking down the aisle, commanding presence, lifting his daughter gently as everyone else silently watched. Hashtags exploded. #PilotDad, #grounded for love, #flight 382 fail. The airline issued a formal apology by morning. "We are deeply sorry for the distress caused to Ms. Carter and her family. Our internal review is underway, and the crew member involved has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. This should never have happened." But for Marcus, that wasn't enough. He went on national television, calm, composed, and direct. "This isn't about just my daughter. It's about every young person who's dismissed, every passenger treated like cargo, every parent who gets that emergency call. If you're trusted to care for others at 30,000 feet, you'd better act like it." The public rallied behind him. Layla received messages of support from across the country, even a few from medical advocates and pilots who pledged to push for new in-flight medical training. A month later, the airline quietly updated its crew training. A month after the incident, buried beneath routine industry updates, a quiet shift occurred in the airline's official operations manual. A new section was added under passenger medical protocol. At the top, in bold, the Carter Clause, emergency medication handling. It mandated that no flight attendant may discard or confiscate clearly identified prescription medication from a passenger without first consulting the captain and confirming with medical dispatch. Violating this policy would now result in immediate suspension pending review. It was a small change on paper, but a giant step in the real world. Layla and her father were invited to a private meeting with the airline's executive board. Lawyers were present, but this time, so were physicians, advocates, and even 2 pilots who had seen the viral video. They offered a formal apology, not just corporate, but personal. The CEO shook Marcus's hand and told him directly, "Your daughter changed our system. And your response reminded us what leadership looks like." Layla, still a little shy in crowds, simply smiled and said, "I just want to fly without being afraid." Back home, things went back to normal, mostly. Layla started her senior year of high school with a little more confidence. Her classmates knew her story. Some called her the girl who grounded a plane. And Marcus? He never bragged. He never capitalized on the spotlight. But every time he saw a plane take off from their front porch, he'd glance at it with a quiet smirk and whisper, "Not on my watch." Weeks passed, but the storm hadn't cleared for Karen Mitchell, the flight attendant who threw out Layla's medication. The airline's internal investigation was swift. Dozens of passengers had submitted written statements. Cell phone footage confirmed everything. Her demeanor, her dismissal of the teen's pleas, even the exact moment she tossed the pouch into the trash bin without checking its contents. Karen was called into a disciplinary hearing. She arrived with a union rep, confident it would be a slap on the wrist. But the room was quiet. Serious. No small talk. Just thick binders, printed transcripts, and the words, "gross negligence," on the cover. The HR director didn't mince words. This wasn't a policy misunderstanding. It was a failure in human judgment. You overstepped your authority, endangered a passenger's health, and violated both FAA guidelines and our own training. Karen tried to argue. "I didn't know," but they cut her off. "You didn't ask. And now that choice has consequences." Her employment was officially terminated. Effective immediately. Outside the building, reporters were already waiting. She said nothing. No statement. No apology. Just a downward glance as she slipped into a rideshare and disappeared from the public eye. She had become the face of what not to do, while Layla Carter had become the symbol of what could change. Meanwhile, Marcus got one final letter from the airline's legal team. Not a lawsuit, not a threat, but an invitation. They wanted his input on future passenger safety workshops. His response: "Send me the syllabus. Let's make sure this never happens again." The video of Marcus boarding Flight 382 had now surpassed 10 million views on social media. It wasn't just the moment he confronted the crew, it was the look in his eyes. The calm fire of a father who refused to let protocol override common sense. That image had inspired thousands of parents, veterans, and advocates across the country. Layla's story was featured on major morning shows, parenting podcasts, and even a national aviation safety panel. But she didn't chase the spotlight. "I didn't want to be a headline," she told one interviewer. "I just wanted to land safely." Her words struck a nerve. Parents began posting their own travel stories under hashtags like #FlySmart and #ProtectOurKids. Stories of ignored medical needs, crew overreach, or children dismissed when they spoke up. But with each post came a shift, a call for reform, not rage. People weren't just angry. They were motivated. One airline CEO, not from Flight 382's company, even tweeted, "The Carter Protocol should be standard across the industry. Time we listen to passengers, especially our youngest ones." That tweet alone gained over 300,000 likes and became part of a larger aviation conference on compassionate travel policy. Layla didn't attend. She had a math test that day. But Marcus sent a note on her behalf: "Real strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes, it's a quiet teen asking for help, and not backing down when someone tries to ignore her." Months later, Flight 382 was just a flight number again, nothing viral, nothing controversial. But its impact remained. Airlines across the country had quietly updated their training. Medical kits were reviewed. Flight crews were required to complete new modules on passenger communication, de-escalation, and medical exception handling. Some called it overkill. Others called it a liability move. But for those who knew the full story, it was about dignity. Layla went on to speak at a youth leadership summit, her first real public appearance. She didn't prepare a long speech. Just a short message. Sometimes you won't be taken seriously. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you have to be louder, or have someone strong enough to stand beside you. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Her father watched from the front row, tears held back by pure pride. He wasn't used to sitting still, but in that moment, he wouldn't have moved for the world. That night, as they flew home, first class, courtesy of a different airline, a flight attendant quietly approached Layla. "Ms. Carter," she whispered, kneeling beside her. "Your story changed how I do my job. I just wanted to say thank you." Layla smiled, shy but proud. "Thank you for listening." The attendant gave her a respectful nod, and walked away. Marcus leaned over and whispered, "We're clear for takeoff, kiddo." Layla looked out the window as the engines roared and the plane lifted into the clouds, not just carrying passengers, but carrying change. While the world was watching the viral clips and reading headlines, there was a side of the story that never made it online. After the incident, Marcus received a call, not from media, not from airline execs, but from a retired FAA investigator named Gene Holloway. Someone who had served with Marcus back in the day. "Still protecting people like you're in the cockpit," Gene chuckled over the phone. But then he got serious. "I reviewed the preliminary reports. What happened on that plane, it wasn't just poor judgment. It was a failure of training. You didn't just stop a flight, Marcus. You exposed a weakness in the system." Gene wasn't the only one. Behind the scenes, 3 other passengers had filed formal complaints. One was a nurse who recognized the medical pouch but had been ignored by the crew when she tried to speak up. Another was a mother who said she'd had a similar issue years ago, but never knew where to report it. The last was a crew member, anonymously, who confirmed that Karen had a history of power-tripping over passengers, especially younger ones. None of this was made public. But it all went into the official record. Later, Marcus and Layla were quietly invited to an off-the-books FAA advisory roundtable. No cameras. No press. Just people who wanted to fix what had gone wrong. By the end of the session, one of the directors looked at Layla and said, "You'll never know how many people you've helped just by standing your ground." Layla simply nodded. She was never trying to be a symbol. She was just trying to survive one flight. A year had passed. Flight 382 was long gone from the news cycle, but its ripple effects still reached far corners of the aviation world. Layla Carter. She was now a freshman at a university known for both its STEM programs and student activism. Pre-med, of course, inspired by her experience and the dozens of young kids who wrote to her afterward, saying, "You made me feel braver." One letter in particular stuck with her. It came from a 12-year-old girl named Mia who had a similar condition and wrote, "I used to be scared to fly. But my mom showed me your story. Now I keep my meds in my pocket, and I speak up." Layla framed that letter. As for Marcus, he eventually returned to a private aviation job, flying small executive charters. But every now and then, he'd get recognized by a passenger or a crew member. "Are you that guy who?" He'd just nod. No ego. No drama. Just a dad who did what any good dad should. On one quiet afternoon, Layla and Marcus were back at the airport, not for a press event, not for a meeting, just for a trip. As they sat in the terminal waiting to board, a new flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Miss Carter," she asked softly. "You probably don't remember, but I was on that same flight, a few rows back. You didn't see me. But I saw you." Layla blinked in surprise. The attendant continued, "That day changed how I treat everyone. Every time I walk the aisle, I remember you." Layla smiled, her voice gentle. "Thanks for telling me." Then the boarding call came over the speaker. Flight 217 to New York. Marcus stood, grabbed both their bags, and held out his hand. "You ready to fly, Captain?" he teased. Layla grinned and took his hand. "Ready for takeoff." They walked toward the gate, father and daughter, side by side, stronger, wiser, and carrying more than just luggage. They carried a legacy.